How dare they look at me like I'm nothing but a burden? After everything I've given. I whispered to myself, staring at the email my daughter had just sent. There it was in black and white, an invitation rescinded, a mother excluded from her own family's vacation. 35 years of sacrifice dismissed with a few taps on a keyboard. But what my children didn't realize was that their rejection would become the catalyst for the most satisfying chapter of my life. They had no idea who I really was or what I was capable of. They were about to learn that underestimating Eleanor Wilson would be the biggest mistake they'd ever make. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never expected to be sitting alone in my modest apartment at 62, scrolling through photos of my children and grandchildren enjoying the sunshine at a luxury resort in Maui without me. The same resort I'd mentioned wanting to visit for the past decade. The trip I'd been saving up for since retiring from teaching elementary school 5 years ago. Teaching was never a path to wealth, but it was fulfilling work that allowed me to raise my 3 children, Jessica, Daniel, and Rebecca, after their father walked out when they were still in elementary school. Those early years were a blur of second jobs, coupon clipping, and endless sacrifices. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for Daniel's soccer camp. I worked night shifts at the local diner to afford Jessica's dance classes. I postponed my own education for years so Rebecca could attend the art program she desperately wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me that my children, who now lived in spacious homes with manicured lawns, seemed to have forgotten what it took to get them there. Perhaps that's the curse of good parenting. If you do it well enough, your children never truly understand what you gave up for them. Mom, it's just that this is meant to be an adults-only vacation, Jessica had explained over the phone 3 weeks earlier, her voice carrying that patronizing tone she'd developed since marrying Bradley, a financial advisor who looked down on anyone with less than 6 figures in their investment portfolio. The resort is extremely exclusive, and we've been planning this for months. But I am an adult, I'd replied, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. And I've been saving for this trip for years. You know how much I've wanted to see Hawaii. It's not just that, she'd sighed, as if explaining something to a child. It's going to be very expensive. The rooms at the Monarch are over $900 a night, and you know how tight things have been for you since retirement. What Jessica didn't know, what none of my children knew, was that tight was a relative term. Yes, I lived simply in my modest apartment. Yes, I clipped coupons and shopped sales. But these were habits formed during decades of frugality, not necessities in my current life. The truth was far more complex. My late mother, Evelyn, had left me a substantial inheritance 5 years ago, the proceeds from the sale of her antique business and the family property in Connecticut that had unexpectedly skyrocketed in value when a tech company bought up land in the area. The inheritance had been a shock, coming just as I retired from teaching. Suddenly, I had over $5 million sitting in various accounts. But old habits die hard. I kept my apartment, drove my decade-old Toyota, and continued living modestly. Perhaps it was foolish not to tell my children about the inheritance, but something held me back. Some small voice warned me to wait, to watch, to see how they would treat their financially struggling mother when they thought she had nothing to offer but love. That decision proved more revealing than I could have imagined. "We're just concerned about you, Mom," Daniel had added during a separate call, his MBA-polished voice smoothly transitioning into what I recognized as his client management tone. "You know Brad and Jessica are covering most of the costs for Rebecca and her family, since she and Tom have been struggling with the new business. And honestly, the grandkids can be a handful. It would probably be too stressful for you. Too stressful. As if I hadn't managed classrooms of 30 energetic children for decades. As if I hadn't raised 3 kids alone while working multiple jobs." The final blow came in an email from Rebecca, Once my sensitive artist child, now apparently as pragmatic as her siblings. Mom, we love you, but this trip is about networking too. Brad has some important clients joining us, and Jessica's trying to recruit a new partner for her law firm. It's not just a vacation. Maybe we can take you to the beach at Clearwater this fall instead. Clearwater, a 2-hour drive from my apartment. A consolation prize. That email came with photos attached. Jessica's family testing out their new designer swimwear, Daniel showing off the expensive snorkeling gear he'd purchased, Rebecca's husband proudly displaying the luxury cabana they'd reserved. All at the Monarch Resort and Spa in Maui, the very place I'd talked about visiting for years. I closed my laptop and sat in silence, something cold and unfamiliar crystallizing in my chest. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to feel something beyond maternal sacrifice. I felt anger. Pure, clarifying anger. I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 15 years. Martin, it's Eleanor Wilson. I believe it's time we discuss that opportunity you mentioned when Evelyn passed. Martin Green had been my mother's attorney and financial advisor for decades. When she died, he'd suggested several investment opportunities that I'd declined, preferring to keep the inheritance in conservative accounts while I adjusted to retirement. Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise. Martin's voice was warm with genuine pleasure. Of course I remember. Are you looking to diversify your portfolio now? Actually, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I'm interested in acquiring a property, a specific property, the Monarch Resort and Spa in Maui. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds before Martin cleared his throat. The Monarch? Eleanor, that's a significant investment property. It's one of the premier luxury resorts in Hawaii. We're talking potentially hundreds of millions. Is it currently for sale? Not publicly, but there have been rumors in investment circles that the ownership group might entertain offers. They've been facing some challenges since the pandemic. But Eleanor, this would require substantially more capital than your inheritance alone. I smiled to myself. Martin, my mother always said you were the best in the business because you could make the impossible merely difficult. I'd like to see what's possible here. And I should mention that I haven't touched a penny of my inheritance in 5 years. It's grown considerably under your firm's management. Another pause, shorter this time. I could almost hear the calculations happening. I'll make some discreet inquiries, he finally said, a new note of respect in his voice. But may I ask, what's prompted this sudden interest in hospitality investments? I glanced down at my laptop, at the smiling faces of my children enjoying their exclusive vacation without me. Let's just say I'm planning a family reunion. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Martin, energized by the challenge, discovered that the Monarch was indeed quietly being shopped to potential buyers. The original development group, facing internal disputes and cash flow issues, was asking $127 million, a bargain considering the property's potential and location. It's still significantly more than your available capital, Martin explained during a video conference, but I've structured a proposal. We can leverage your inheritance for approximately 45% ownership. The remaining shares would need to come from other investors. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I listened carefully as he outlined the financial details. And control of operations? Decision-making authority? With the right structure, you could secure controlling interest and a position as chairperson of the ownership group, with final say on major decisions, Martin explained. But Eleanor, I have to ask, are you certain about this? Resort management is complex. There are other, simpler ways to invest in hospitality if that's your new direction. I smiled, thinking about Jessica's networking pitch, Daniel's business, acumen he was so proud of, and Rebecca's husband Tom, who had launched 3 failed startups already. Martin, I spent 30 years managing hundreds of children and their often more difficult parents with a budget that was slashed every year. I think I can handle a luxury resort. I leaned forward, my decision crystallizing. Make it happen. And one more thing. I want this handled with complete discretion. No public announcements about the new ownership until after the transition is complete. Martin nodded, a gleam of appreciation in his eyes. I'll have the preliminary paperwork. To you tomorrow. We'll need to move quickly if we want to close this before your family's upcoming vacation. One last thing, I added. I'd like to be installed as an honored guest consultant at the property during the transition, starting the day before my family arrives. After we hung up, I opened my email and began composing a message to my children. My fingers hovered over the keyboard briefly before I began typing. Dear Jessica, Daniel, and Rebecca, I've been thinking about our recent conversations regarding your Hawaii vacation. While I understand your concerns, I've decided to take a solo trip to Maui during the same period. Don't worry, I won't intrude on your retreat. I've made my own arrangements at a different resort. Perhaps we might meet for dinner one evening, if your networking schedule permits. Love, Mom. I hit send before I could reconsider, then leaned back in my chair with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since their father left, I was prioritizing myself over my children's expectations. It felt like stepping out of a room I'd been confined in for decades. My phone buzzed almost immediately with a text from Jessica. Mom, be reasonable. Hawaii is expensive and you're on a fixed income. What about your emergency fund? This isn't like you to be so impulsive. I simply replied, I've accounted for all expenses. Looking forward to seeing the island I've dreamed about for so long. Then I silenced my phone and began researching everything I could about the Monarch Resort and Spa. The acquisition moved with surprising speed. Martin's team worked tirelessly, and within 17 days, the preliminary agreements were signed. I was now the controlling chairperson of the investment group that owned the Monarch Resort and Spa, though this information remained confidential among a small circle of executives and key staff. 3 days before my family's scheduled arrival, I flew first class to Maui. The resort's general manager, Keone Alana, met me personally at the airport, a courtesy he believed was extended to a major investor and new chairperson. Mrs. Wilson, welcome to Maui, he said, taking my carry-on bag. We're honored to have you with us during this transition. Your timing is perfect. We're currently at 85% capacity, but expecting to reach full occupancy by the weekend. Thank you, Mr. Alana. And please, call me Eleanor. I smiled, noting his professional demeanor that couldn't quite hide his curiosity about the retired schoolteacher who had just become his boss. I'm looking forward to experiencing the resort as a guest before we discuss any operational changes. The drive to the resort offered breathtaking ocean views, the kind I'd seen in countless travel magazines but never experienced firsthand. As we pulled into the circular driveway of the Monarch, I finally understood why it commanded such outrageous nightly rates. Paradise had been architected into every detail, from the open-air lobby with soaring ceilings woven from sustainable bamboo to the cascading infinity pools that seemed to melt into the ocean beyond. Staff members in crisp white uniforms appeared at perfectly timed intervals, offering cold towels scented with plumeria and glasses of fresh-squeezed passion fruit juice. We've upgraded you to our chairman's suite, Keone explained as we walked through gardens filled with exotic flowers. It offers the best view of the property and complete privacy. Actually, I said, pausing to admire a particularly vibrant bird of paradise. I've reviewed the reservation list for the coming week. My family arrives tomorrow. The Bradley Harrison party? I'd prefer accommodations near their assigned villas. Keone looked surprised but recovered quickly. Of course. The Harrison party has reserved 3 oceanfront villas in our exclusive South Cove. We can place you in the executive villa adjacent to them. It's typically reserved for visiting dignitaries. Perfect, I smiled. And one more thing, Mr. Alana. I'd prefer if my connection to ownership remained confidential for now. To the staff and other guests, I'm simply Eleanor Wilson, a valued guest consultant helping with customer experience assessment. That evening, I dined alone on my private terrace, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the day, messages from my children expressing increasing concern about my reckless decision to travel to Hawaii alone. Jessica. Mom, I spoke with your financial advisor friend Martin since. You wouldn't answer my calls. He refused to discuss your finances, but assured me you're making sound decisions. What's going on with you? Daniel. Just landed in Honolulu for our connecting flight. Still can't believe you're doing this. At least tell us where you're staying so we can check on you. Rebecca. The kids are so excited about the water slides at the Monarch. If you're really determined to be in Maui too, maybe you could watch them one afternoon so Tom and I could have a spa day. I smiled at the irony of Rebecca's message. Already, the narrative was shifting from, "It would be too stressful for you," to "Perhaps you could babysit." I decided not to respond to any of them yet. Instead, I spent the evening reviewing the materials Keone had provided about the resort: staff organization charts, recent customer satisfaction surveys, and financial performance indicators. By the time I went to bed, I had filled a notebook with observations and questions. If I was going to be a resort owner, I intended to be an informed one. The next morning, I was enjoying breakfast on my terrace when I heard familiar voices below. Glancing over the railing, I saw them. Jessica supervising the unloading of what appeared to be at least 12 suitcases from an airport shuttle. Bradley. On his phone, ignoring the commotion. Daniel instructing a bellhop on the proper handling of his golf clubs, and Rebecca attempting to corral her excited children while her husband Tom complained about the heat. I watched them for a moment, these successful adults who had once been my tiny children clutching my hands for safety. Now they navigated the world with the absolute confidence of people who believed they had earned everything they had, who had forgotten the foundation upon which they had built their lives. It was time to remind them. I made my way down to the main lobby, deliberately timing my entrance for maximum impact. I wore a simple linen dress that I'd purchased specifically for this moment. Expensive but not flashy, the kind of effortless elegance that Jessica always tried too hard to achieve. Mom? Daniel spotted me first, his mouth dropping open in genuine shock. What are you doing here? Every head in my family turned at once. Jessica nearly tripped over a suitcase, while Bradley's phone call abruptly ended. Rebecca's children broke free of her grip and ran toward me with excited squeals of, "Grandma!" I knelt to embrace my grandchildren, giving myself a moment to compose my face before standing to address my stunned adult children. "What a wonderful coincidence," I said with a warm smile. "It seems we're staying at the same resort after all." Jessica recovered first, her legal training kicking in as she searched for the rational explanation. But how? The rooms here are nearly $1,000 a night, and they've been booked solid for months. We had to reserve these villas a year ago. "Oh, I have a friend who helped make arrangements," I said vaguely, watching as a staff member approached our group. "Mrs. Wilson," the young woman said with a respectful nod. "Mr. Alana asked me to inform you that everything has been prepared according to your specifications. The special tour is scheduled for whenever you're ready." "Thank you," I replied, noticing how my children's expressions shifted from confusion to suspicion. "Mom, what's going on?" Rebecca asked, stepping closer. "What kind of specifications and special tour is she talking about?" Before I could answer, Bradley interjected, with his characteristic condescension. "Clearly there's been some mix-up. Eleanor, if you've been misled by some discount travel site or timeshare presentation—" "Actually," I interrupted smoothly, "there's no confusion. I'm staying in the executive villa just next to your accommodations. And as for the tour—" I gestured to Keone, who was approaching our group. Perhaps Mr. Alana can explain. Mrs. Wilson, Keone greeted me with a small bow before turning to my family. You must be Mrs. Wilson's family. We're honored to welcome you to the Monarch. As she requested, we've arranged a private tour of the entire property, including our operational areas that are typically off-limits to guests. We thought you might be interested in seeing how a luxury resort functions from behind the scenes. Daniel's business instincts visibly kicked in. That's unusual access. Mom, how did you arrange this? I smiled enigmatically. Let's just say I've developed an interest in hospitality investments recently. Investments? Jessica echoed, her voice rising slightly. Mom, you can barely afford your condo maintenance fees. What are you talking about? I noticed several nearby guests glancing our way, drawn by Jessica's increasingly loud tone. Keone smoothly intervened, his hospitality training evident. Perhaps you'd all like to continue this conversation in our private reception lounge. We've prepared welcome refreshments, and your villas are being finalized as we speak. As we followed him through the lobby, I felt a small hand slip into mine. It was Lily, Rebecca's 6-year-old daughter. Grandma, she whispered, looking up at me with innocent curiosity. Are you rich now? Out of the mouths of babes. I squeezed her hand gently. Wealth comes in many forms, sweetheart. I've always been rich in the ways that matter most. The private lounge was a peaceful sanctuary away from the bustle of the main lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic ocean views, while attentive staff served tropical fruit platters and champagne flutes filled with something sparkling and golden. As soon as the door closed behind us, Jessica rounded on me. Mom, this isn't funny anymore. What's going on? How are you staying at this resort? And what's all this talk about investments? I took a slow sip of my drink, savoring the moment. For decades, I had been the one answering to them, explaining my decisions, defending my choices. How quickly the tables had turned. Your grandmother left me an inheritance when she passed 5 years ago, I said simply. I chose not to mention it. Grandma Evelyn? Daniel's brow furrowed. But her antique shop was tiny, and that old house in Connecticut couldn't have been worth much. The old house sat on 12 acres that a tech company wanted for their new campus, I corrected him. And Evelyn had been quietly investing in art and antiques her entire life. The total value was approximately $7.5 million. The silence that followed was deafening. My 3 children stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. Bradley, ever the financial advisor, was the first to recover. 7.5 million? And you've just been sitting on this information for 5 years? Why wouldn't you tell your own children about this? I met his gaze steadily. I was curious to see how my family would treat me when they thought I had nothing to offer but love. The words hung in the air like a judgment. Jessica's face flushed red, while Daniel suddenly became intensely interested in his shoes. Rebecca was the only one who looked directly at me, tears forming in her eyes as the implication of my words sank in. But that still doesn't explain. Jessica gestured around us at the luxury resort. Even with that inheritance, staying here is excessive, and this special treatment you're receiving? That's a fair observation, I acknowledged. The inheritance alone wouldn't explain my current situation, but solid investments can grow significantly over time, especially with expert guidance. Keone, who had been discreetly standing near the door, stepped forward. If I may, Mrs. Wilson has been quite modest about her position. As the controlling chairperson of our ownership group, she's entitled to certain privileges. 5 jaws dropped simultaneously. Even the usually unflappable Bradley seemed to physically recoil in shock. Ownership group? Daniel sputtered. Mom, are you saying you own this resort? A controlling interest, I corrected gently. The acquisition was finalized just last week. Quite a coincidence that you had already planned to stay here, isn't it? Rebecca collapsed onto a nearby sofa, her expression oscillating between disbelief and something that looked almost like respect. You bought an entire resort because we wouldn't include you in our vacation? Put that way, it did. Sound rather extreme. I laughed softly, the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Of course not, dear. I bought it because it was a sound investment opportunity. The fact that I could welcome my family as my first official guests is merely a delightful bonus. Jessica, ever the pragmatist, was already recalculating the family dynamics. So all this time, when we were worried about your retirement funds, when we offered to help with your expenses? I appreciated the thought, I said sincerely. But as you can see, it wasn't necessary. Bradley, who had built his entire personality around being the family's financial authority, looked physically ill. $7.5 million invested 5 years ago, with compound growth, plus controlling interest in a property of this caliber. He was muttering almost to himself, running calculations that clearly showed I was now the wealthiest person in the family by several orders of magnitude. Don't worry, Bradley, I said, unable to resist a small dig. I'm still happy to hear your investment advice, though I must say, Martin has been quite helpful these past few years. Martin Green? Bradley's voice rose an octave. The Martin Green of Coastal Capital Partners? He's your financial advisor? I nodded, enjoying his discomfort perhaps more than I should have. Evelyn trusted him implicitly, as do I. Daniel, ever the strategic thinker, was already pivoting. Mom, this is incredible news. I always said you had a sharp mind for business. In fact, I've been working on a new venture that could really benefit from your perspective. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to discuss potential ventures, I interrupted smoothly. But first, I thought you might enjoy that behind-the-scenes tour. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on our operational efficiencies. After all, this is a family business now. For the next 2 hours, we toured the Monarch from top to bottom. Keone showed us everything from the immaculate kitchens where world-class chefs prepared gourmet meals, to the sophisticated water filtration systems for the pools, to the staff quarters which I was pleased to see were comfortable and well-maintained. Throughout the tour, I watched my children's expressions evolve from shock to calculation to something approaching respect. They peppered Keone with increasingly informed questions, each subtly trying to demonstrate their business acumen. Even Jessica, who had been the most dismissive of my financial capabilities, began offering suggestions about legal structures for liability protection. By the time we reached the end of the tour, standing on a private stretch of beach as the afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, the dynamic between us had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the aging mother they needed to manage and occasionally humor. I had become someone they needed to reconsider entirely. Your villas have been prepared, Keone announced. And Mrs. Wilson, we've arranged for the private dinner. You requested on the North Point at sunset. Wonderful, I smiled. My family will be joining me, of course. As Keone excused himself, Rebecca approached me hesitantly, her earlier tears now dried, but her expression still vulnerable. Mom, I don't even know what to say. I feel terrible about how we excluded you from this trip. Do you feel terrible about excluding me? Or terrible that you didn't know I could afford to buy the resort? I asked gently. Her face flushed with shame, and for a moment, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. Both, she admitted quietly, but mostly the first one. We've been so condescending, haven't we? I put an arm around her shoulders. You've been operating under certain assumptions, incorrect ones as it turns out, but understandable given the information you thought you had. Jessica and Daniel joined us, both wearing expressions that tried to balance contrition with calculation. What happens now? Daniel asked. With the resort? With everything? I looked out at the ocean, at the waves gently breaking on the shore, at the endless horizon where possibilities seem to stretch forever. "Now we enjoy our family vacation," I said simply. "And perhaps, if you're interested, we can discuss your involvement in this new venture. I suspect each of you has something valuable to contribute." That evening, as we dined on fresh seafood, under the stars with tiki torches illuminating our private beach dinner, I watched my family with new eyes. They were flawed, certainly, entitled in ways I had perhaps enabled, blind to privileges they had come to take for granted. But they were still my children, still the babies I had rocked to sleep, the toddlers whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenagers whose broken hearts I had soothed. Jessica proposed a toast, raising her glass with uncharacteristic humility. To Mom, who taught us that appearances can be deceiving, assumptions can be wrong, and it's never too late to rewrite your story. I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. "And to family," I added, "who sometimes need to be reminded that the woman who raised them might still have a few surprises left." As laughter filled the warm Hawaiian night, I felt something inside. Me release. A tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For decades, I had defined myself solely through the lens of motherhood, measuring my worth by my children's needs and expectations. Now, at 62, I was finally discovering who Eleanor Wilson might be when she put herself first, and to my surprise, I rather liked her. The morning after our beachside dinner, I woke before sunrise and slipped out to walk along the shore. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the ocean breeze gentle against my skin. For so many years, I had denied myself these simple pleasures, always putting aside my own dreams to ensure my children could pursue theirs. Now, watching the first golden rays break across the horizon, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was what freedom felt like. My solitude didn't last long. I spotted Jessica power walking along the beach in expensive athletic wear, her face set in the determined expression she wore when tackling a difficult legal brief. "Mom," she called out, jogging over to me. "I've been looking everywhere for you. The concierge said you left your villa at 5:30 a.m. "Good morning to you too," I replied, amused by her characteristic intensity. I wanted to watch the sunrise. She fell into step beside me, her breathing carefully controlled. I barely slept last night. My mind kept racing with questions. She glanced at me sideways. "Were you ever going to tell us about the inheritance?" I continued walking, letting the question sit between us for a moment. "Eventually, though I must admit, discovering how you all viewed me when you thought I had limited resources was educational." Jessica winced. "We were awful, weren't we?" "Not awful," I corrected her gently. "Just accustomed to seeing me in a certain light. The struggling single mother who sacrificed everything for her children. It's a role I played perfectly for decades. Perhaps too perfectly." She stopped walking abruptly. "But why hide it for 5 years? You've been living in that cramped apartment, driving that old car, while sitting on millions. It doesn't make sense." I turned to face her, really seeing her, my ambitious firstborn who had fought so hard to prove herself in a cutthroat legal world. "What would you have done if I had told you immediately after Grandma died? I would have helped you invest it properly, set up trusts for the grandchildren, maybe found you a nice condo in our neighborhood." She stopped, suddenly hearing herself. "I would have taken over and managed it all for you, wouldn't I?" I nodded. "And I would have let you, because that was our dynamic. You three making decisions for your aging mother who clearly couldn't be trusted to manage her own affairs." The truth of it seemed to sink in. Jessica's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. "I never thought of it that way." "I know." I resumed walking, and after a moment, she followed. The inheritance gave me something I'd never had before: financial independence. I needed time to figure out who I was beyond being your mother. We walked in silence for several minutes, the only sound the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. The beach was still largely empty, with just a few early morning joggers and hotel staff preparing cabanas for the day ahead. You know, Jessica finally said, I became a lawyer because of you. This surprised me. I thought it was because of that mock trial program in high school. She shook her head. It was watching you negotiate with bill collectors when Dad left. You were terrified, I could tell, but you never let them see it. You stood your ground, found solutions, bought us time. You were magnificent. Her voice caught. I wanted to be that strong. Something warm unfurled in my chest. All these years, and I'd never known this about my daughter. You're stronger than I ever was. No, she said firmly. I just had better opportunities. Opportunities you created. She hesitated. Bradley was really shaken by yesterday's revelation, you know. His entire identity is wrapped up in being the family's financial guru. I couldn't help but smile. I noticed. How is he handling it? He was up until 3 a.m. researching luxury resort profit margins and investment strategies. Jessica laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard from her in years. I think he's preparing a presentation for you. I look forward to it, I said, genuinely meaning it. Despite Bradley's often condescending manner, he was undeniably intelligent when it came to finances. I could use his expertise. This resort acquisition is new territory for me. Jessica looked at me with newfound respect. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing us all scramble to adjust. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a certain satisfaction, I admitted. But more than that, I'm enjoying seeing each of you recognize me as something other than just your mother. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. I love being your mother, Jessica. It's the greatest joy of my life, but it's not all that I am. She nodded slowly. I'm beginning to see that. As we turned back toward the resort, the full splendor of the Monarch came into view, its elegant white buildings nestled among lush tropical gardens, infinity pools gleaming in the morning sun. My resort. The thought still felt surreal. So, Jessica said, her lawyer's mind clearly working through implications. What happens next? With the resort? With us? With everything? That depends, I replied. I have some ideas that I'd like to discuss with all of you over breakfast. 9 o'clock at the Ocean Terrace? She raised an eyebrow. Is this a family discussion or a business meeting? Perhaps a bit of both, I smiled. Dress accordingly. By 9, the Ocean Terrace was bathed in glorious morning sunshine. I'd arranged for a private section to be cordoned off for our family, with a stunning view of the beach below. A staff member escorted me to the table, where I found all 3 of my children already waiting, along with Bradley and Tom. Rebecca's children were notably absent. The kids are at the resort's activity club, Rebecca explained as I sat down. I thought this meeting might require our full attention. I nodded appreciatively. Rebecca had always been perceptive. Thank you all for being punctual, I began, accepting a cup of coffee from a hovering server. I know this vacation has taken an unexpected turn. That's putting it mildly, Daniel muttered, though his expression held more curiosity than resentment. Bradley cleared his throat, straightening the collar of his polo shirt. Eleanor, I've taken the liberty of reviewing some preliminary figures about resort operations in this market segment. If you're open to suggestions, I've prepared some thoughts on optimizing revenue streams. I'd be delighted to hear them, Bradley, I said sincerely. Perhaps after breakfast? He seemed pleased, if slightly thrown by my ready acceptance. Tom, Rebecca's husband, looked uncomfortable, as if unsure whether he belonged in this discussion. His custom t-shirt business had struggled during the pandemic, leaving Rebecca as their family's primary breadwinner, a fact that Jessica often subtly referenced in family gatherings. Before we discuss business matters, I continued, I'd like to clarify a few personal points. First, yes, I now have substantial financial resources. Yes, I chose not to share this information with you. And yes, I deliberately purchased this resort when I learned you were staying here. But why? Daniel asked, leaning forward. Was it to teach us a lesson? Get revenge for excluding you? I considered this. Not revenge, no. But perhaps I wanted to shift the balance of power, if only temporarily, to make you see me differently. Message received, Daniel said with a wry smile. Nothing says don't underestimate me quite like buying the luxury resort your kids are vacationing at. This broke the tension, and everyone laughed, including me. The question now, I continued once the chuckles subsided, is where we go? From here. I've made a significant investment, one that could benefit our entire family if managed properly. Jessica's expression turned serious. Are you proposing some kind of family business arrangement? I'm considering it, I nodded. Each of you has skills that could be valuable to this enterprise. Jessica, your legal expertise would be invaluable for navigating the regulatory complexities of international hospitality. Daniel, your marketing background could help position the Monarch against growing competition in the luxury travel sector. Rebecca, your eye for design could bring fresh perspective to our public spaces and guest accommodations. I paused, looking at my 3 children and their spouses. And Bradley and Tom, your financial and entrepreneurial insights would round out our team nicely. The table fell silent as they absorbed my proposal. Are you serious? Daniel finally asked. You want us involved in running the resort? Not day-to-day operations, I clarified. We have excellent staff for that, led by Keone. I'm talking about strategic direction, overall vision, quarterly meetings, perhaps some specific projects based on your areas of expertise. Bradley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, leaned forward. This isn't just sentimentality, is it? You genuinely believe we could add value? I wouldn't suggest it otherwise, I replied firmly. This is business, not charity. I expect professionalism and results. Tom fidgeted with his napkin. I'm not sure what I could contribute. My business experience hasn't exactly been successful. I turned to him with a gentle smile. Tom, you've launched 3 businesses from scratch. Yes, they face challenges, but you understand what it means to build something from nothing. That resilience is valuable. Plus, your experience with merchandise and brand identity could help develop our retail strategy. The wonder in his eyes, at being taken seriously, nearly broke my heart. I realized how rarely anyone in the family acknowledged his efforts rather than his failures. I'd like to take some time to consider this, Jessica said, ever the pragmatist. We all have existing careers, commitments. Of course, I agreed. This isn't a decision to be made hastily. For now, let's enjoy our vacation. We can reconvene at my home in Florida next month to discuss details if there's interest. Your home in Florida? Daniel raised an eyebrow. You mean your apartment? I smiled mysteriously. Not exactly. I've recently acquired a property in Key Biscayne, much more suitable for family gatherings than my apartment. Rebecca's eyes widened. Mom, what else haven't you told us? So many things, dear, I laughed. We have plenty of time to catch up. Now, shall we order? I recommend the papaya with lime and the macadamia nut pancakes. The remainder of breakfast passed in a blur of delicious food and increasingly relaxed conversation. As my children peppered me with questions about my secret financial life, I found myself enjoying their genuine interest. For perhaps the first time since they'd become adults, they were truly curious about me as a person, not just as their mother. After breakfast, Bradley approached me with his tablet in hand, clearly eager to share his financial insights. We agreed to meet later that afternoon for what he called a brief overview, but what I suspected would be an elaborate presentation. Daniel excused himself to take a business call, while Jessica mentioned wanting to explore the resort's fitness facilities. This left me alone with Rebecca and Tom, who seemed hesitant to leave. "Mom," Rebecca began tentatively, "would you like to join us at the main pool? The kids have been asking about you all morning." I felt a flutter of pleasure at the simple invitation. "I'd love to. Let me change and meet you there in 30 minutes. As I walked back to my villa, I reflected on how quickly things had changed. Yesterday, I had been deliberately excluded from their vacation. Today, I was being invited to join family activities. The cynical part of me wondered if this newfound inclusivity was solely due to my revealed wealth and position. But the mother, in me, the part that had loved these children through every tantrum, every heartbreak, every triumph, chose to believe that beneath the shock and recalculation lay genuine remorse and a desire to reconnect. My villa was cool and quiet after the brightness of the morning. As I changed into a swimming costume and cover-up, I caught my reflection in the mirror. When had I started seeing myself as old? There were lines around my eyes, yes, and my hair had long since turned silver. But the woman looking back at me didn't match the fragile, declining figure my children had constructed in their minds. "There you are, Eleanor," I murmured to my reflection. "Welcome back." The main pool area was a marvel of design, a series of interconnected lagoons with varying depths, temperature-controlled waters, and strategically placed islands of palm trees providing natural shade. Rebecca waved to me from a large cabana, where she sat with Tom and the children. "Grandma!" Lily called out, scrambling from the pool and running toward me, dripping water everywhere. "Did you really buy this whole place?" I laughed, kneeling to her level. "Just a part of it, sweetheart. Do you like it?" "It's the best place ever," she exclaimed. "There's a water slide that goes through a cave and fish that swim right next to you in the big pool, and they make ice cream with flowers in it." "That sounds magical," I smiled, letting her tug me toward the cabana. Rebecca's twin boys, Alex and Ethan, were more reserved, offering shy waves from the pool's edge. At 10, they were already developing the self-consciousness of approaching adolescence. "Boys," Rebecca called, "come say hello to Grandma properly." They trudged over, leaving wet footprints on the stone deck. "Hi, Grandma," they said in unison, before Alex added, "Is it true you're, super rich now?" "Alex," Rebecca scolded, but I just laughed. "I have more than I need," I told him honestly. "But the most valuable things in my life aren't things at all." I looked meaningfully at my grandchildren. They're people. This earned me an eye roll from Ethan, but a thoughtful nod from Alex. "Can we go back to the pool now?" Ethan asked impatiently. "Yes, but stay where we can see you," Tom instructed, surprising me with his authoritative tone. Perhaps I had underestimated him all these years. As the children raced back to the water, I settled into a comfortable lounge chair next to Rebecca. "They've grown so much," I observed. "When did Alex get so tall?" "Growth spurt last summer," Rebecca sighed. "He outgrew all his clothes in 3 months, nearly bankrupted us buying new wardrobes." She froze, suddenly realizing what she'd said. "I mean, not literally bankrupted, of course. We're fine." I didn't mean to imply. "Rebecca," I interrupted gently, "you don't need to walk on eggshells around me. I know your design business has been affected by the economic downturn. It's all right to acknowledge challenges." She relaxed slightly. "It's been difficult," she admitted. "My biggest client cut their budget by half last quarter. Tom's latest venture is promising but still pre-revenue. We're not in trouble exactly, but things are tighter than we'd like." Tom shifted uncomfortably beside her. "We should have been more transparent about our situation. Instead, we let Jessica and Brad cover most of this vacation, then turned around and excluded you because of assumed financial constraints. It was hypocritical." His frankness surprised and impressed me. "Thank you for that honesty, Tom. It means a great deal." A comfortable silence fell between us as we watched the children play. The twins were taking turns timing each other as they held their breath underwater, while Lily carefully arranged a collection of pool toys in some complex game of her own invention. "Would you really want me involved in redesigning aspects of the resort?" Rebecca asked suddenly. "You weren't just saying that to make me feel included?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Your design sense has always been exceptional. The southwestern wing is scheduled for renovation next quarter. I think your perspective could bring something unique to the project." Her eyes lit up with genuine excitement, the same expression she'd had as a child when presented with a new box of colored pencils. "I've actually been studying biophilic design principles, integrating natural elements into built environments to reduce stress and enhance well-being. It would be perfect for a resort setting." "Tell me more," I encouraged. And for the next half hour, Rebecca spoke with passionate expertise about design concepts I'd never considered. How the right balance of natural light affected sleep quality, how certain color palettes could subconsciously encourage relaxation, how thoughtfully chosen materials could connect guests to the local environment. I found myself taking mental notes, genuinely impressed by her knowledge and vision. This was a side of Rebecca I'd rarely seen. Confident, authoritative, innovative. Had she always been this way in her professional life, or had I simply never given her the opportunity to share this part of herself with me? Tom watched her with unmistakable pride, occasionally adding supportive comments or asking insightful questions. Their partnership seemed more balanced than I'd previously recognized, built on mutual respect rather than traditional roles or financial contribution. Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the pool. Lily had climbed too high on a decorative rock feature and was afraid to climb down. Before any of us could react, a resort staff member was already there, calmly talking her through a safe descent. Once she was safely on the ground, he escorted her back to our cabana. "Ms. Lily wanted to see the view from the top," he explained, with a good-natured smile. "She's quite the adventurer." I thanked him for his assistance, noticing how smoothly and professionally he'd handled the situation. Throughout the morning, I'd been observing the staff interactions, impressed by their genuine warmth and attention to detail. Keone had clearly built an exceptional team. Speaking of Keone, I spotted him making his way through the pool area, stopping to chat briefly with guests and check in with staff members. When he saw me, he changed direction to approach our cabana. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted me with a respectful nod. "I hope you're enjoying your morning. There are a few matters I'd like to discuss at your convenience. Nothing urgent, just some operational updates you requested." "Thank you, Keone. Perhaps we could meet at 2:00? "Perfect. I'll prepare the quarterly reports for your review as well." He smiled politely at Rebecca and Tom before departing. Rebecca raised an eyebrow at me. "Quarterly reports? You really are taking this seriously, aren't you?" "Of course," I replied, surprised by her surprise. "It's a significant investment. Did you think I was playing some elaborate game?" "Honestly, part of me did," she admitted. "It seemed so. Unlike you, or at least unlike the you we thought we knew." "That's fair," I acknowledged. "I haven't exactly been transparent about my capabilities." Tom, who had been quiet for some time, suddenly spoke up. "Can I ask you something, Eleanor? Something personal?" "Certainly." He seemed to gather his courage. "Do you ever regret it? The sacrifices you made for your kids? All those years of putting your own dreams on hold?" Rebecca looked startled by her husband's directness, but I appreciated the question. "That's complex," I said thoughtfully. "There were moments, standing in the grocery store calculating whether I could afford both new shoes for Daniel and the registration fee for Jessica's debate club, or staying up until dawn finishing sewing projects for extra money while knowing I had to teach a full day of classes in a few hours. When I felt something close to regret, or at least resentment. I paused, watching Lily, who had now joined her brothers in a spirited game of Marco Polo. But those moments were always temporary. The deeper truth is that raising you three was never just a sacrifice. It was also a privilege, a joy. And it made me who I am today. Someone capable of managing this resort, of making tough decisions, of seeing the long game. Tom nodded slowly. I worry about that with Rebecca sometimes, that she's putting too much of herself aside for the kids. For me, that someday she'll wake up resentful of all she didn't pursue. Rebecca looked at him in surprise. You've never said that before. Because I benefit from your sacrifices, he said simply. It's not easy to question an arrangement that works in your favor. I felt a new respect blooming for my son-in-law. Perhaps I had misjudged him as well. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Daniel, freshly showered and looking remarkably relaxed for someone who had just been on a business call. Everything okay at the office? Rebecca asked. Better than okay, Daniel grinned, dropping into an empty chair. Remember that tourism board contract we've been chasing for months? We just got it. Full budget, no cuts. That's wonderful, I exclaimed. Congratulations. Thanks, Mom. His smile turned slightly sheepish. Actually, I may have used my connection to the Monarch's new chairperson as leverage during negotiations. Hope that's okay. I laughed. As long as you can deliver on whatever promises you made. Nothing specific, he assured me. Just implied that I had insider knowledge of luxury tourism trends thanks to family connections. Technically true now, right? Before I could respond, Jessica appeared, dressed in workout clothes and looking energized. The fitness center here is incredible, she announced, accepting a glass of water from a passing attendant. State-of-the-art equipment, personal trainers on staff, and a yoga studio with ocean views. Mom, you should really consider expanding the wellness offerings. There's huge demand in the luxury market right now. I smiled inwardly at how quickly Jessica had transitioned from skepticism to strategic planning. I've been thinking the same thing. Keone mentioned there's an underutilized space adjacent to the spa that could be developed. Perfect for meditation classes or specialized treatments, Jessica nodded eagerly. Bradley and I visited a resort in Thailand last year that had the most amazing holistic wellness program. I could compile some notes for you. I'd appreciate that, I said, genuinely pleased by her enthusiasm. As my children continued discussing potential improvements for the Monarch, I sat back and observed them with a warm sense of satisfaction. In just 24 hours, they had gone from excluding me from their vacation to fully embracing the possibility of a family business venture. Part of me wondered if their sudden interest stemmed more from the allure of involvement with a prestigious property than from a desire to work with their mother. But perhaps the motivation didn't matter as much as the opportunity it created. A chance to rebuild our relationships on a more equal footing, to see each other with fresh eyes, to create something meaningful together. By 1:30, hunger drove us to the beachside grill for lunch. The children, exhausted from hours of swimming, sat quietly munching on burgers and fruit skewers. The adults' conversation flowed easily from resort business, to family updates, to reminiscences about past vacations. Remember that cabin we rented in the Poconos when the kids were little? I asked, smiling at the memory. The one with the leaky roof and the family of raccoons living under the porch? Daniel groaned. How could I forget? Jessica was convinced they were going to break in and steal her collection of hair scrunchies. They had very shifty eyes, Jessica protested, laughing, and that bigger one definitely had fashion aspirations. What I remember, Rebecca said softly, is Mom telling us ghost stories by flashlight when the power went out during that thunderstorm. I was terrified but trying not to show it, and then Mom suddenly switched to funny stories instead. She somehow knew I was too scared without me saying a word. You were breathing too fast, I explained, touched that she remembered. And you had that little crease between your eyebrows, the same one you get now when you're anxious but trying to hide it. Rebecca's hand unconsciously went to her forehead. I didn't realize I still did that. A mother notices things, I said simply. A comfortable silence fell over the table, broken only by the gentle sound of waves lapping at the shore and the distant laughter of other guests. "This is nice," Tom said unexpectedly. "Being together like this, we should do it more often." There were murmurs of agreement around the table, though I noticed Jessica checking her watch surreptitiously. Always the busy one, my Jessica. "I should prepare for my meeting with Keone," I said, standing up. "Why don't we reconvene for dinner? The chef has prepared a special menu for us at the Sunset Pavilion." As everyone dispersed to their afternoon activities, I made my way to the administrative building located discreetly behind the main resort complex. Keone was waiting in a tastefully appointed office with large windows overlooking a small private garden. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted me, gesturing to a comfortable chair. "I've prepared the operational overview as requested." For the next hour, we delved into the details of running a luxury resort. Occupancy rates, staff turnover, customer satisfaction metrics, maintenance schedules, and upcoming promotional events. Keone was thorough and clearly competent, answering my questions with patience and insight. "There is one matter we should discuss," he said toward the end of our meeting, his expression turning more serious. The previous ownership group had been considering a significant expansion, acquiring the adjacent property to develop an adults-only section with premium villas. The preliminary permits have been secured, but no final decision was made. "What's your opinion on this expansion?" I asked, valuing his expertise. Keone considered the question carefully. "The financial projections are promising, particularly given the growing market for high-end, child-free luxury experiences. However, it would require substantial capital investment and might detract from the Monarch's current identity as a family-friendly destination." I nodded, appreciating his balanced assessment. "Let's table this for now. I'd like to fully understand our current operations before considering expansion." "A wise approach," he agreed. "There's no rush to decide." As our meeting concluded, Keone hesitated before adding, "If I may say so, Mrs. Wilson, it's refreshing to work with an owner who takes such genuine interest in the details. The previous ownership group was more distant." "Thank you, Keone. I believe in understanding what I own." I smiled, rising from my chair. "And please call me Eleanor." As I left the administrative building, I spotted Bradley waiting near the path, his tablet clutched firmly in his hand. His presentation, I remembered with mild amusement. "Eleanor," he called, striding toward me with purpose. "I was hoping to catch you. Do you have time for that financial overview we discussed?" "Of course, Bradley. Why don't we walk toward the beach? I could use some fresh air." He fell into step beside me, immediately launching into a detailed analysis of luxury, resort profit margins, occupancy rate optimization, and revenue diversification strategies. Despite his sometimes pompous delivery, his insights were genuinely valuable and well-researched. "These are excellent observations," I said when he finally paused for breath. "I particularly like your suggestion about developing premium experiential packages. Have you shared these thoughts with Jessica?" He looked slightly taken aback. "Not in detail. She's been so busy with her practice, and to be honest, she doesn't always take my financial advice seriously in family matters. Perhaps that should change," I suggested gently. "You clearly have expertise worth considering. And partnerships work best when skills are acknowledged and respected." Bradley studied me with newfound curiosity. "You're not what I expected." "Eleanor, not at all. Life is full of surprises," I replied with a smile. "Speaking of which, I should warn you that I've invited Martin Green to join us for dinner tomorrow night. I thought you might enjoy meeting him professionally." Bradley's eyes widened at the mention of the renowned financial advisor. "Martin Green is coming here? Tomorrow?" "He's been handling my affairs for years," I explained. and given our new venture, it seemed appropriate to introduce him to the family. That would be— Thank you, Bradley stammered, clearly imagining the networking possibilities. As we reached the beach, I spotted my grandchildren building an elaborate sandcastle near the water's edge, with Tom supervising while Rebecca sketched in a notebook, nearby, occasionally glancing up at the resort buildings with a thoughtful expression. It seems you've given everyone something to think about, Bradley observed, following my gaze. Change can be healthy, I replied. For all of us. And as I looked out at the endless blue horizon, I felt a profound sense of anticipation for what lay ahead, not just for the Monarch Resort, but for my family and for myself. After decades of putting everyone else first, I had finally found the courage to write a new chapter in my story. And somehow, miraculously, I had managed to bring my children along with me. The sun began its gradual descent toward the horizon, casting a golden glow across the beach. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, perhaps even new conflicts. But for now, watching my family against the backdrop of this beautiful place that was partially mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The simple, profound joy of being exactly where I was meant to be. Dinner at the Sunset Pavilion exceeded even my expectations. The structure was perched on a rocky outcropping at the western edge of the property, accessible by a winding path illuminated, with subtle ground lighting. As our group approached, I caught my first glimpse of the pavilion against the darkening sky. Its silhouette graced with flowing curves reminiscent of a monarch butterfly's wings, open to the ocean breezes yet intimate enough for a family gathering. This is breathtaking, Rebecca whispered beside me, her designer's eye clearly appreciating the architectural details. Inside, a single table had been arranged in the center, dressed in crisp white linens and adorned with arrangements of local flowers and floating candles. The staff had positioned the seating so that every person would have an unobstructed view of the sunset, while remaining sheltered from the occasional strong wind. Mrs. Wilson, the maitre d' greeted me with a respectful bow. Everything has been arranged according to your preferences. Chef Makoa has prepared a special 7-course tasting menu celebrating Hawaiian cuisine, with wine pairings if desired. Perfect, thank you, I replied, noticing how my children exchanged impressed glances at the deferential treatment. As we took our seats, the adults at the main table, the children at a smaller adjacent table with activities to keep them occupied, I found myself studying the faces of my family in the golden light of approaching sunset. Just 2 days ago, these same people had deemed me too financially insecure and socially irrelevant to join their vacation. Now they gathered around me with expressions ranging from lingering disbelief to calculating interest to genuine warmth. A toast, Daniel announced, raising his glass once our aperitifs had been served. To Mom, who has thoroughly upended our assumptions and given us all something to think about. To Mom, they echoed, and I noticed even Bradley's expression had softened from its usual calculating assessment to something approaching genuine respect. And to family, I added, which can surprise us at any age if we remain open to possibility. The first course arrived, delicate poke served on individual spoons carved from mother of pearl, the fresh ahi tuna glistening with a light citrus marinade. Jessica immediately began photographing the presentation. For my law partners, she explained with a slightly embarrassed smile. They'll never believe this setup otherwise. Speaking of your partners, I said, have you told them about our potential family venture yet? Jessica shook her head. I wanted to understand more details first. The firm is very particular about outside business interests, especially ones that might intersect with our client relationships. Understandable, I nodded. Though I imagine a connection to the Monarch might actually benefit your corporate client recruitment. It certainly wouldn't hurt, she admitted, especially with the entertainment industry clients we've been courting. They all vacation in places like this. Daniel was already typing notes into his phone. We should develop special corporate retreat packages, high-end strategy sessions for executives, team-building experiences that don't feel like forced corporate bonding. There's a huge market for luxury business events that don't feel stuffy or conventional. Excellent idea, I agreed, pleased to see his marketing mind already engaged. Keone mentioned that the conference facilities are currently underutilized. As each exquisite course arrived, our conversation flowed from business possibilities to family news to reminiscences. The children occasionally wandered over from their table for bites of food or quick hugs before returning to their activities, supervised by a patient resort staff member who seemed to have an inexhaustible supply of games and stories. By the eye. Main course. Locally raised lamb with native Hawaiian vegetables and a reduction sauce that had even Bradley, our resident food critic, mumbling appreciative noises. The atmosphere had relaxed considerably. The sun was now a glowing half-circle on the horizon, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. You know, Rebecca said thoughtfully, watching the sunset, I never understood why you were so fixated on visiting Hawaii all these years. But now I get it. There's something magical about this place. When your father and I were first married, I explained, we used to talk about coming here someday, saving up for our 20th anniversary. Obviously, that never happened. The mention of their father created a momentary awkwardness. Richard had remarried just 2 years after our divorce, starting a second family that had little connection to his first. My children had maintained obligatory relationships with him, but the emotional breach had never fully healed. Daniel broke the silence. Well, you certainly made it happen in style, Mom. Not just visiting Hawaii, but owning a piece of it. Life rarely unfolds as we expect, I replied, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. But sometimes the detours lead us to even better destinations. As dessert was served, a delicate passion fruit mousse with caramelized pineapple, Lily escaped from the children's table and climbed into my lap, her small body warm and slightly sticky against mine. Grandma, she whispered loudly, in that way children do when they think they're being discreet. Are you going to live in Hawaii now? The question drew everyone's attention. I haven't decided yet, sweetheart, I answered honestly. I might split my time between here and Florida. Would you like to visit me if I did? She nodded enthusiastically. Can I have my own room with seashells and a mermaid bed? I laughed, hugging her close. I think that could be arranged. Rebecca gave me a searching look across the table. You're really considering living here part-time? Why not? I replied. At my age, shouldn't I be somewhere beautiful? The resort needs hands-on leadership, at least initially, and Florida will still be there for hurricane season. It's just so far, she said, a note of something like concern in her voice. We're all on the East Coast. About that, Daniel interjected, setting down his dessert spoon. Melanie and I have been talking about relocating to the West Coast. My agency's biggest clients are in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and we've been doing more and more business there. Hawaii would actually be more convenient from California. This was clearly news to his siblings, who both stared at him in surprise. When were you planning to mention this? Jessica demanded. Daniel shrugged. It's still in the discussion phase, but Mom's situation has definitely added a point in the pro column. Well, I think it's wonderful, Tom spoke up, unexpectedly. Eleanor deserves to live wherever makes her happy, and modern air travel makes distance less relevant than it used to be. I gave him an appreciative smile, touched by his support. Besides, Bradley added, his business mind clearly running, calculations, maintaining a presence here would be advantageous for overseeing operations. Property management from a distance is never ideal. Jessica looked between them, then back to me. I suppose we could arrange regular family gatherings. The children would love visiting Hawaii. That's the beauty of owning a resort, I pointed, out with a smile. Plenty of room for everyone. As the last light faded from the sky, staff members lit additional lanterns around the pavilion, casting a warm, intimate glow over our gathering. The ocean beyond had transformed from brilliant blue to mysterious dark velvet, the boundary between sea and sky almost indistinguishable. I have a confession to make, I said after a comfortable silence had settled. When I first learned you were all coming here without me, I was hurt. More than hurt. I was angry. Buying the resort wasn't just a business decision. It was an assertion, a way of proving something. My children exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond to this admission. But what surprised me most, I continued, is how quickly my motivation has evolved. Yes, there was satisfaction in seeing your faces when you realized what I'd done. But now, I'm genuinely excited about what we might build together. This could be more than just an investment or a statement. It could be a legacy. A family legacy, Rebecca said thoughtfully. Exactly. I nodded. Something that connects us, that might even pass to your children someday. A tangible reminder that our family isn't defined by past hurts or misunderstandings, but by what we choose to create moving forward. Daniel raised his glass again. To the Wilson family legacy, then. May it be as spectacular as this sunset. As we clinked glasses, I felt a sense of possibility blooming that went far beyond business considerations. Perhaps this unexpected detour would heal old wounds I hadn't even recognized were still open. After dinner, as we strolled back along the illuminated pathway toward our villas, Jessica fell into step beside me, linking her arm through mine in a gesture reminiscent of her teenage years. You've surprised all of us, you know, she said, quietly. Not just with the money or the resort, but with how different you seem. Different how? I asked, curious about her perception. She considered this carefully. More confident. More direct. You used to be so accommodating. Always putting everyone else's needs first, smoothing things over, making sure no one was upset. This version of you is more. She searched for the right word. Authentic? I suggested. Yes, she nodded. Like you've dropped a mask you've been wearing for decades. It suits you. We walked in companionable silence for a moment before she added, I hope you know that despite how it might have appeared, we do value you. We just got used to seeing you in a certain role. I know, I assured her, and I'm partly responsible for that. I reinforced that image for years. Why? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. I thought about this as we approached the fork in the path where we would separate to our respective villas. I think because it was easier in some ways. Being the self-sacrificing mother gave me a clear identity, a purpose. Stepping beyond that role meant facing questions I wasn't ready to answer. Like what? Like who am I when I'm not defined by what I give to others? What do I actually want for myself? What brings me joy? I squeezed her arm gently. Questions I'm finally exploring now. Jessica kissed my cheek before we parted. Well, I like this version of you, Mom. Even when she makes me uncomfortable, by upending all my assumptions. Good night, dear, I smiled. Sleep well. I returned to my villa feeling lighter than I had in years. The evening had exceeded my expectations, not just in the quality of the experience, which was exceptional, but in the genuine connections that seemed to be reforming with my children. There was still wariness, still recalculation happening, behind their eyes at times. But there were also moments of authentic warmth and respect that felt like seeds of something new taking root. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a message from Martin. Arriving tomorrow at 2 p.m., looking forward to meeting the family. Have interesting prospects to discuss. I smiled to myself, imagining Bradley's reaction to meeting his financial idol. Martin Green wasn't just any financial advisor. He was something of a legend in investment circles, known for his uncanny ability to spot opportunities others missed. His decision to work with my mother decades ago had been considered unusual at the time. Evelyn's antique business was modest, and her investments initially small. But Martin had recognized something in her, an innate understanding of value, perhaps, or simply the kind of integrity he preferred in clients. He had shown the same faith in me, guiding my inheritance with wisdom and patience, never pushing for flashier investments when I preferred conservative approaches. The resort acquisition had been our first major deviation from that pattern, and even then, he had structured it carefully to mitigate risk. I drifted off to sleep with the sound of distant waves in my ears, feeling a sense of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. Morning arrived with a gentle knock at my door, room service delivering a pot of freshly brewed coffee, and a selection of local fruits, arranged artfully on a tray with a small orchid. The accompanying note read, "Thought you might enjoy a quiet start to your day. See you at lunch. Daniel." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched me. Daniel had always been observant, even as a child, noticing small details others missed. When he was 10, he'd saved his allowance for weeks to buy me a special pen that matched my favorite blue sweater, proudly explaining that he'd noticed I always wore that sweater when grading papers. I took my coffee onto the private lanai, watching the early morning light play across the ocean. The resort was just beginning to stir, staff members grooming the beach, setting up cabanas, arranging fresh towels by the pools. A few early rising guests walked along the shore or swam quiet laps in the main pool. My phone buzzed with an email from Keone, the daily operational brief he'd started sending after our meeting yesterday. Occupancy was at 92%, slightly above projections for the season. A minor maintenance issue with one of the kitchen refrigeration units had been resolved overnight. The celebrity chef scheduled for next month's culinary festival had confirmed his participation. All routine matters, but I appreciated being kept in the loop. After replying with a brief acknowledgement, I dressed in casual resort wear and headed out to explore more of the property on my own. Without the filter of the official tour or family dynamics, I wanted to observe how the resort actually functioned, how staff interacted when they didn't know the owner was watching, how facilities were maintained in less visible areas, how the overall experience flowed for typical guests. I began at the northernmost point of the property, a secluded cove where a small but exquisite spa had been built into the natural rock formation. The morning was dedicated to aquatic therapy sessions. I observed through glass doors as an instructor guided a small group through gentle movements in a mineralized pool. The participants' faces reflected serene concentration, their bodies moving with increasing fluidity as the session progressed. "Wonderful program," commented a voice beside me. I turned to find an elegant woman in her 70s, her silver hair styled in a chic bob. "I've been coming here for years, and their aquatic therapy has done more for my arthritis than a decade of conventional treatments." "That's remarkable," I replied, genuinely interested. "How frequently do you visit?" 3 times a year, she said, extending her hand. "I'm Vivian Chen. My late husband and I discovered the monarch 15 years ago, and I've continued the tradition since his passing." "Eleanor Wilson," I introduced myself, shaking her hand. "I'm relatively new to the monarch." "You'll become addicted?" Vivian smiled. "There's something special about this place. Though I must say there have been some service inconsistencies in recent years. Nothing major, just small details that weren't quite up to the standard we old-timers remember." "I'd be interested to hear more," I said, recognizing the value of this kind of guest perspective. "Would you join me for tea?" Over the next hour, Vivian provided invaluable insights from a long-term guest's perspective. Subtle shifts in staff training she had noticed, amenities that had been quietly downgraded, traditions that had been abandoned. But she also highlighted strengths, staff members who went above and beyond, experiences that remained exceptional. the overall atmosphere that kept her returning year after year. The previous ownership became too focused on quarterly profits, she observed shrewdly. They cut corners that guests like me notice, even if newer visitors don't have the comparison point. What would you bring back if you could? I asked. The sunset lei ceremony, she replied without hesitation. It was a beautiful tradition. Each evening at sunset, guests would receive a fresh flower lei and participate in a brief but meaningful Hawaiian blessing. It created this wonderful sense of community and place. They discontinued it 3 years ago, citing cost concerns. I made a mental note to discuss this with Keone. Such traditions often define the character of a property, creating emotional connections that brought guests back, year after year. As we parted ways, Vivian pressed her card into my hand. If you ever want a candid guest perspective, call me. I'm something of a luxury hotel connoisseur at this point in my life. I thanked her and continued my explorations, moving through the property with an observant eye. In the main building, I noticed the flooring in less trafficked corridors needed updating. Near the family pool, a staff member was remarkably patient with a tantrum-throwing toddler, diffusing the situation with gentle humor that soon had the child giggling instead of screaming. At one of the smaller restaurants, I ordered coffee and observed the efficiency of service, the freshness of the pastries, the overall cleanliness of the space. By mid-morning, I had compiled a substantial mental list of both strengths to reinforce and areas for improvement. Rather than heading directly back to my villa to document these observations, I found myself drawn to the Children's Activity Center, curious about how my grandchildren were spending their morning. The center was a marvel of thoughtful design, open and airy yet secure, with different zones for various age groups and activities. Through a large window, I spotted Alex and Ethan engaged in what appeared to be a robotics workshop, their faces focused in concentration as they assembled small mechanical creatures. Lily was in a different area, participating in a Hawaiian cultural activity, learning a traditional dance, her small face serious as she mimicked the instructor's graceful hand movements. "They're having a wonderful time," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Tom, looking refreshed and relaxed in casual resort wear. "Rebecca's at the spa for a morning of pampering," I insisted. "She rarely takes time for herself at home." "That was thoughtful of you," I said, genuinely pleased by his consideration for my daughter. "Are you enjoying some time to yourself as well?" "Actually, I've been exploring the resort's business center," he admitted somewhat sheepishly. "Old habits die hard. I had some ideas after our dinner conversation last night and wanted to do a bit of research." "What kind of ideas?" I asked, intrigued by this glimpse of Tom's business mind. "Well," he began, suddenly animated, "I was thinking about Daniel's suggestion regarding corporate retreats. The Monarch already has the infrastructure, but what's missing is the technology integration that today's executives expect. Virtual reality capabilities, seamless video conferencing with multiple global locations simultaneously, enhanced security protocols for sensitive business discussions." He continued outlining his vision, and I found myself impressed by the clarity and practicality of his thinking. This was not the flaky entrepreneur my children sometimes described, but a man with genuine insight and innovative ideas. "You should share these thoughts with the group when we meet with Martin this afternoon," I suggested. "He has extensive connections in the tech sector who might be interested in partnership opportunities." Tom looked surprised. "You really think so?" "Absolutely," I said firmly. "Don't let Jessica and Daniel's sometimes dismissive attitude diminish your confidence, Tom. You have valuable perspectives to offer." He seemed genuinely touched by this validation. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means a lot coming from you." We walked together toward the main pool, continuing our conversation about potential technology enhancements for the resort. I found myself enjoying Tom's company. His enthusiasm was infectious, and his ideas, while ambitious, We're grounded in practical business considerations. Near the pool, we spotted Bradley supervising the twins as they practiced snorkeling. In the shallow end. He waved us over, looking uncharacteristically relaxed in swim trunks and a resort-branded t-shirt. "They're natural swimmers," he said proudly, as Alex executed a perfect dive beneath the water. "We're going to try the reef exploration later this afternoon if you'd like to join us." "I'd enjoy that," I replied, somewhat surprised by the invitation. Bradley had never been one to include me in activities with the children before. Though, I'll need to check the timing against my meeting with Martin. At the mention of Martin's name, Bradley's interest visibly sharpened. "What time is he arriving? I've prepared some questions about current market trends that I'd love to discuss with him." "His flight lands at 1:30, I explained. "We'll meet in the private dining room at 3. Business casual attire." Bradley nodded, already looking as though he was mentally reviewing his wardrobe options. "I'll make sure the boys are settled with the kids' program by then." Tom and I continued our stroll, eventually finding ourselves near the beach bar where Daniel sat working on his laptop, sunglasses pushed up on his head, an untouched tropical drink sweating beside him. "Even in paradise, the work follows you?" I asked, sliding into the chair across from him. He looked up with a rueful smile. "Just finishing a proposal for a potential new client. Their CMO is actually staying here at the Monarch. Talk about a fortuitous coincidence." "That does seem convenient," I agreed. "Have you approached them yet?" "We're having drinks later today," Daniel confirmed. "I'm hoping the resort connection gives me an edge over the competition." I couldn't help but smile at how quickly my children were leveraging their new association with the Monarch. "Just be careful not to overpromise regarding any special treatment. We want to maintain the resort's reputation for equally exceptional service to all guests." Daniel had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Of course, I was just thinking of mentioning our family's recent investment in the property as a conversation starter." "That seems appropriate," I nodded. "Actually, I just had an interesting conversation with a long-term guest that you might find valuable, particularly her insights about traditions that have been discontinued but were meaningful to returning visitors." As I shared Vivian's feedback, Daniel began taking notes, his marketing mind clearly seeing the potential in rekindling beloved traditions as part of a brand revival strategy. "This is gold, Mom," he said enthusiastically. "Guest loyalty is everything in the luxury sector. We should create a formal program to reconnect with long-term guests like Ms. Chen, perhaps create an exclusive legacy guest program with special recognition and amenities." "I like that concept," I agreed. "Why don't you flesh out a proposal? We can discuss it as part of our meeting this afternoon." He nodded, already typing rapidly. "I'll have something prepared." I left him to his work and continued toward my villa, passing Jessica along the way as she returned from what appeared to be a vigorous tennis match, her face flushed with exertion. "Mom! Perfect timing," she called out. "I just got off the phone with my partner Claudia. She's fascinated by our potential resort venture and has some thoughts about optimizing the corporate structure for both liability protection and tax efficiency. Would you mind if she joined our meeting with Martin remotely?" I hesitated, considering the implications. "Let me check with Martin first. He tends to be quite protective of client confidentiality, especially in preliminary discussions." Jessica looked momentarily disappointed but nodded her understanding. "Of course. Just let me know. Claudia specializes in hospitality law. She could be a valuable resource." "I'll discuss it with him when he arrives," I promised. "How was your tennis?" "Game? Humbling," she admitted with a laugh. "The pro here is world-class." He pointed out technique flaws I didn't even know I had. "Sometimes fresh eyes see what we've overlooked," I observed. "That's been my experience these past few days with all of you." Jessica tilted her head questioningly. "What do you mean?" "I've spent decades seeing each of you in certain fixed ways. Jessica, the overachiever, Daniel, the charmer, Rebecca, the sensitive artist. but watching you all here, in this new context, I'm noticing dimensions I've overlooked or underestimated. Like what? She asked, genuinely curious. Like Tom's business acumen, or Bradley's genuine devotion to the twins, or your own capacity for self-reflection. I smiled at her surprised expression. People are rarely as simple as the categories we put them in. She considered this thoughtfully. I suppose we've all been guilty of that, especially regarding you. I squeezed her arm affectionately. We have time to discover new perspectives. Speaking of which, I should prepare for Martin's arrival. See you at 3? As I walked back to my villa, my phone buzzed with a message from Keone. Mrs. Wilson, the helicopter has been arranged for Mr. Green's arrival. Security has been briefed regarding privacy protocols. Is there anything else you require for this afternoon's meeting? I replied with gratitude, once again impressed by Keone's attentiveness to detail. The pieces were falling into place for what promised to be an interesting family discussion, one that might shape not just the future of the monarch, but our relationships with each other moving forward. Back in my villa, I took a moment to stand on the lanai, looking out at the spectacular view that was partially mine. The journey that had brought me here, from hurt and anger at being excluded to this moment of potential transformation, felt almost dreamlike in its improbability. Yet here I stood, preparing to meet with one of the world's most respected financial advisors to discuss a family business venture involving my children, the same children who, just days ago, had deemed me too financially insecure to join their vacation. Life's ironies were not lost on me, but neither was its potential for unexpected grace. Whatever the outcome of today's meeting, I had already gained something precious, a new understanding with my family, and perhaps more, importantly, a new understanding of myself. With that thought, I turned back inside to prepare for Martin's arrival and the next chapter in this unexpected adventure. The sound of helicopter blades cutting through the afternoon air drew curious glances from resort guests lounging by the Rhine pools. While the monarch occasionally received high-profile arrivals, the sleek black helicopter emblazoned with the discreet logo of Coastal Capital Partners was still an unusual sight. I stood on the private helipad, shielding my eyes against the wind as the aircraft made its descent. Martin Green emerged with his characteristic precision. At 72, he moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had mastered the art of making every action count. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his linen suit unwrinkled despite the flight, his handshake firm as he greeted me. Eleanor, he smiled warmly. Magnificent property. Your mother would have been proud of this acquisition. Thank you, Martin. I think she would have appreciated the irony, at least. I gestured toward the waiting golf cart. Shall we? The family is eager to meet you. As we settled into the cart, Martin gave me an appraising look. And how is that going? The family dynamic? Evolving, I replied honestly. They're still processing the revelation about my financial situation, and the resort purchase was unexpected. Martin chuckled. I imagine so. Nothing quite like buying the resort your children are vacationing at to make a statement. It wasn't just about making a statement, I began defensively, then caught myself as I saw the knowing twinkle in his eye. Well, perhaps partly, but it's also a sound investment. Indeed it is, he agreed, his expression turning more serious. Which is why I've brought some proposals I think will interest you. The interest we've received since word of your acquisition began circulating in certain circles has been significant. Before I could ask for clarification, we arrived at the main building. Keone was waiting to escort us to the private dining room where my family would be gathering. As we walked through the lobby, I noticed more than a few curious glances. Martin's reputation in financial circles made him instantly recognizable to many high-net-worth individuals. Mr. Green, Keone greeted him respectfully. Welcome to the Monarch. We're honored to have you with us. The honor is mine, Martin replied graciously. Eleanor has acquired a truly exceptional property. I'm particularly impressed by the integration of traditional Hawaiian architectural elements with modern luxury aesthetics. Keone looked pleased by the observation. That was a deliberate choice in the original design. We've worked hard to maintain that balance through subsequent renovations. It shows. Martin nodded approvingly as we continued toward our destination. The private dining room had been transformed since morning. The large conference table now set with elegant place settings, display screens discreetly built into the wall activated and ready, a sideboard arranged with refreshments. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the ocean stretched to the horizon, providing a dramatic backdrop for our meeting. Perfect, I murmured to Keone. Thank you for arranging everything so quickly. My pleasure, Mrs. Wilson. Your family members have been notified and should be arriving shortly. Will you need anything else before you begin? I think we're all set, I replied, noticing Martin already examining the room with an appraising eye. As Keone departed, Martin turned to me with raised eyebrows. Mrs. Wilson, that's quite formal for someone who now owns a controlling interest in the property. I smiled. We're maintaining some discretion about my position. For now, I'm officially a valued guest consultant to most of the staff. Ah, the subtle approach, he nodded approvingly. Speaking of approaches, have you considered what role you want your children to play in this venture? Beyond the ideas we discussed on the phone? I'm still assessing their interests and capabilities, I admitted. They each have different skills that could benefit the monarch, but I'm wary of creating artificial positions just for family harmony. Wise, Martin agreed. Family businesses succeed when roles align with genuine talents, not obligations or entitlements. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Daniel, who entered with an eagerness he was clearly trying to temper with professional composure. Mom, the presentation is ready whenever. He stopped mid-sentence as he registered Martin's presence. Mr. Green, it's an honor to meet you, sir. Daniel Wilson. He extended his hand with barely concealed excitement. The marketing prodigy, Martin nodded, shaking Daniel's hand. Eleanor has mentioned your impressive work with digital strategy for hospitality brands. Daniel shot me a surprised glance. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to have discussed his career with someone of Martin's caliber. Before he could respond, Jessica arrived with Bradley in tow, both dressed in business casual attire that nonetheless conveyed careful preparation. Martin, allow me to introduce my daughter Jessica and her husband Bradley, I said as they approached. Jessica is a partner at Caldwell & Reed, specializing in corporate law. Bradley is a financial advisor with Hammond Wealth Management. The introductions continued as Rebecca and Tom joined us, completing our family circle. I observed with some amusement how my children and their spouses adjusted their usual dynamics in Martin's presence. Postures straightening, voices modulating to more professional tones, subtle jockeying for position as they arranged themselves around the table. Once everyone was seated and initial pleasantries exchanged, Martin opened his leather portfolio with characteristic precision. First, let me congratulate all of you on this exciting family venture, he began, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to guiding important decisions. The monarch represents an exceptional addition to any investment portfolio, particularly given current market conditions. He proceeded to outline the resort's financial position with remarkable clarity, highlighting strengths, acknowledging challenges, and contextualizing its position within the luxury hospitality sector. I watched my children's faces as they absorbed his assessment, noting how their expressions shifted from polite interest to genuine engagement. What makes this property particularly valuable, Martin continued, is its potential for strategic expansion. The adjacent 50 acres, currently undeveloped, offer rare opportunities in a market where available oceanfront property is increasingly scarce. Bradley leaned forward, his professional interest clearly piqued. Has there been a feasibility study for development of that parcel? Preliminary assessments only, Martin replied. The previous ownership group commissioned basic environmental and zoning analyses, but hadn't progressed to detailed planning. Which brings me to the proposals. I mentioned to Eleanor earlier. He removed several folders from his portfolio, distributing them around the table. Since news of the acquisition began circulating in certain investment circles, we've received expressions of interest from several parties. I've selected the 3 most promising for your consideration. My children exchanged surprised glances as they opened the folders. Jessica was the first to speak, her legal training evident in her precise question. These are partnership proposals for expansion projects, not offers to purchase the existing property? Correct, Martin confirmed. No one is suggesting selling the Monarch. Rather, these are potential joint ventures focused on developing the adjacent land in ways that would complement and enhance the existing resort. Daniel studied the documents with narrowed eyes. Luxury residential villas, an exclusive golf course, expanded wellness facilities. These are significant developments. What kind of capital contributions are these partners proposing? The details vary by proposal, Martin explained, but each represents a substantial investment, between $70 and $120 million, depending on the scope of development. I watched as this information rippled through the room. Even Jessica, usually so composed, couldn't hide her momentary shock at the figures being discussed. These proposals arrived quickly, I observed. The acquisition was only finalized 2 weeks ago. Martin nodded. The luxury resort market moves rapidly, especially for properties with the Monarch's reputation and potential. These expressions of interest have been preliminarily vetted by my team, but warrant thorough due diligence before any serious negotiations. For the next hour, we delved into the specifics of each proposal, the potential partners' backgrounds, their development track records, the financial structures they suggested, and the strategic implications for the Monarch's future. My children engaged with remarkable focus, asking insightful questions that impressed even Martin, whose standards I knew to be exacting. Bradley, in particular, seemed to find his footing in this discussion. His usual, somewhat pompous manner gave way to genuine expertise as he analyzed the financial projections with evident skill. These ROI estimates seem optimistic, he noted, referencing one of the proposals. Luxury villa developments in Hawaii have historically faced longer break-even timelines due to regulatory hurdles and construction costs. Martin nodded approvingly. A fair observation. The projections do assume streamlined approval processes based on the preliminary work already completed. But contingency planning for regulatory delays would be prudent. Tom, who had been relatively quiet, raised his hand hesitantly. I've been researching sustainable luxury tourism trends, and one thing that strikes me about these proposals is their conventional approach. The Monarch has an opportunity to pioneer truly innovative eco-luxury concepts that could differentiate it from competitors. I expected someone to dismiss his comment, Jessica or Daniel perhaps, who often treated Tom's ideas with polite skepticism. Instead, Rebecca jumped in supportively. Tom's right. The luxury market is evolving rapidly. High-net-worth travelers increasingly value authentic sustainability, not just token green initiatives. If we're considering expansion, we should be thinking about regenerative design principles, not just conventional luxury development. Martin turned his attention to Tom and Rebecca with newfound interest. Do you have specific concepts in mind? Tom seemed momentarily startled to be taken seriously, but quickly recovered. Actually, yes. I've been studying several successful models, particularly the integration of renewable energy systems that become design features rather than hidden infrastructure, solar integrated architecture that enhances aesthetic appeal while generating power, water conservation systems that create beautiful landscape elements. As Tom elaborated on his vision, I noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy. My children were listening, really listening, to their brother-in-law's ideas, perhaps for the first time. Even Bradley appeared thoughtful rather than dismissive. "These are valuable perspectives," Martin acknowledged when Tom finished. "The luxury market is indeed changing. Exclusive experiences and genuine sustainability can command premium pricing when executed authentically." He made several notes in his portfolio before continuing. "This brings us to the question of family involvement moving forward. Eleanor has indicated she sees potential for each of you to contribute to the monarch's future. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on potential roles." A moment of silence followed as my children exchanged glances, each seemingly reluctant to be the first to stake a claim. Finally, Jessica took the initiative. "My firm has a dedicated hospitality practice that handles legal matters for several luxury properties. While I'd need to address potential conflicts of interest, I could certainly advise on regulatory compliance, risk management, and contract negotiations for the resort." Daniel followed quickly. "Marketing and brand strategy would be my natural focus. The Monarch has incredible potential for repositioning in the ultra-luxury segment, particularly leveraging digital platforms that target the right demographic. I'd like to be involved in design aspects," Rebecca added, "both for the existing property renovations and any new development, especially if we pursue the sustainable luxury direction Tom described." Bradley cleared his throat. "Financial oversight would be my area. Performance metrics, investment strategies, capital allocation, ensuring the business fundamentals remain strong while pursuing these expansion opportunities." Tom looked hesitant, but with an encouraging nod from me, he spoke up. "I could contribute to innovation and technology integration, creating experiences that differentiate the Monarch from other luxury resorts through thoughtful application of emerging technologies." Martin listened attentively to each of them before turning to me. "Well, Eleanor, it seems you have the makings of a promising leadership team here. What are your thoughts on structuring these roles?" All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of expectations in their gazes. This was the moment I'd been building toward since conceiving this audacious plan. The opportunity to reshape not just my relationship with my children, but their relationships with each other and their own sense of purpose within our family. "I envision an advisory board structure," I began carefully. "Quarterly meetings, clearly defined areas of responsibility, and appropriate compensation for time committed. Not full-time roles that would conflict with existing careers, but meaningful involvement that leverages each person's expertise." I paused, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "However, I want to be clear about one thing. These roles must be earned, not simply granted because of family connection. Each of you would need to develop specific proposals outlining your vision for your area of responsibility, with measurable objectives and clear value creation for the Monarch." A flicker of surprise crossed several faces. Perhaps they had expected automatic appointments based on our conversation at breakfast. But I continued firmly. "Martin will assist me in evaluating these proposals objectively. Those that demonstrate genuine value will be implemented, with appropriate authority and resources allocated. This isn't about creating artificial positions. It's about harnessing real talent to build something exceptional together." The room was silent for a moment as they absorbed this framework. To my relief, Jessica was the first to nod. "That's fair," she acknowledged. "Family businesses fail when they prioritize family harmony over business performance. I'd be happy to develop a detailed proposal for the legal and compliance function." The others voiced similar agreement, though I caught a flash of uncertainty. In Daniel's expression, my marketing-savvy son had perhaps assumed his role would be automatic given his relevant experience. Martin closed his portfolio with an air of conclusion. "Eleanor has assembled a tremendous opportunity here, both financially and as a family legacy. I look forward to seeing your proposals and helping shape this venture moving forward." He checked his watch discreetly. "Now, I believe we have dinner reservations to discuss these matters further in a more relaxed setting?" As we prepared to adjourn the formal portion of our meeting, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and trepidation. The framework I'd established seemed to have been accepted, but the real test would come in the following weeks as my children developed their proposals, and we began the delicate process of defining roles and responsibilities. Before we move to dinner, I said, I want to thank each of you for engaging so thoughtfully today. Whether or not all of you ultimately take formal roles with the monarch, I value your perspectives and hope we can continue these discussions as a family. The dinner that followed was held at the resort's most exclusive restaurant, an intimate space perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, with just 12 tables and a chef whose innovative interpretations of Hawaiian cuisine had earned international acclaim. Martin, ever the consummate networker, engaged each of my children in turn throughout the meal, drawing out their thoughts on everything from global investment trends to the future of luxury hospitality. I observed with quiet pride how well they represented themselves. Jessica's incisive analysis of regulatory challenges facing international resort operators, Daniel's thoughtful perspectives on evolving luxury consumer behavior, Rebecca's passionate advocacy for design that honored cultural context, Bradley's nuanced understanding of capital allocation strategies, and Tom's surprisingly sophisticated grasp of how technology could enhance guest experiences without becoming intrusive. They were impressive individuals, my children and their partners. Perhaps I had underestimated them in some ways, just as they had underestimated me. As the evening progressed, I found myself beside Martin during a momentary lull in conversation, while the others were engaged in a lively debate about sustainable luxury. "They're quite remarkable," he commented quietly. "You've raised exceptional people, Eleanor." "Thank you," I replied, watching as Jessica gesticulated emphatically to make a point, while Daniel good-naturedly challenged her logic. "They've always been bright and driven. I'm just seeing new dimensions to them in this context." Martin swirled his wine thoughtfully. "You know, when you first told me about your plan to purchase the Monarch, I had concerns it might be driven primarily by emotion rather than strategy. But seeing them together like this, I understand your vision more clearly now. And I think Evelyn would approve wholeheartedly," he smiled. "She always believed wealth was a tool for creating possibility, not just security or status. You've created a remarkable possibility here, not just for wealth creation, but for family transformation." His words touched me deeply. My mother had indeed viewed money as a means rather than an end, a perspective she had tried to instill in me, though my years of financial struggle after the divorce had sometimes made that difficult to maintain. "The real test will come when we move beyond discussion to implementation," I cautioned. "Ideas flow easily over good wine and exceptional food. Working together will be more challenging." "True," Martin acknowledged. "But you've established a solid framework. Merit-based roles, clear expectations, independent evaluation. That foundation matters." As coffee and dessert were served, Martin graciously became the center of attention once more, sharing anecdotes from his decades in financial advisory that had my children leaning forward in rapt attention. I used the opportunity to observe them more carefully, noting the subtle dynamics between them. The competitive edge beneath Jessica and Daniel's banter, Rebecca's tendency to defer to her more assertive siblings, the way Bradley positioned himself as an authority while Tom often held back until directly addressed. These patterns had developed over decades, reinforced by their perceptions of each other and the roles they had settled into within our family system. Changing them wouldn't happen overnight, regardless of new business structures or formal roles. Yet I saw glimpses of different possibilities, moments when they listened to each other with genuine interest or acknowledged expertise outside their usual domain. By the time dessert was finished, the conversation had shifted from business to more personal matters. Martin, who had known my mother for decades, shared stories about her that even I hadn't heard. Her shrewd negotiations with reluctant sellers of valuable antiques, Her uncanny ability to spot emerging trends in the collectibles market. Her quiet generosity to causes she believed in. She would have adored seeing all of you together like this, he told my children. Evelyn always regretted not having a larger family herself. She considered Eleanor the daughter she never had by birth. This revelation seemed to surprise my children. "You were that close to Grandma Evelyn?" Jessica asked me. "We became closer after your father left," I explained. "She stepped in to help when I was struggling to manage everything alone. That's when our relationship evolved from mother-daughter to something more like friends or partners." "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Daniel asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. I considered the question carefully. "I suppose because it developed gradually, and by the time you were old enough to notice, it simply was what it was. Evelyn was private about many things, including her financial situation. I respected that privacy." "Just as she respected yours," Martin added, giving me a knowing look. "She always admired how you insisted on making your own way, Eleanor, even when she offered assistance." Rebecca's expression turned thoughtful. "So, that's where you got it from, this inclination to keep your financial situation private. It wasn't just about testing us, it was a value you shared with Grandma." "Partly," I acknowledged, "though I won't deny there was an element of wanting to see how you'd treat me when you thought I had limited resources." Martin glanced at his watch and made a subtle gesture to a staff member, who nodded and departed discreetly. "I'm afraid I must take my leave soon. My pilot informs me we need to depart before the weather system approaching from the north reaches us." "So soon?" Bradley looked genuinely disappointed. "I had hoped to discuss your perspective on alternative investment strategies for the current market volatility." "Perhaps another time," Martin smiled. "I expect we'll have many opportunities to continue these conversations as the Monarch project develops." He turned to me. "Eleanor, a word in private before I depart?" We stepped onto the restaurant's private terrace, the night air warm and fragrant with tropical flowers. In the distance, lightning occasionally illuminated the clouds gathering on the horizon. "You've started something significant here," Martin said without preamble. "Not just the investment, which I believe will prove exceptional, but this family recalibration." "That was always the deeper purpose," I admitted. "The resort is a means, not the end." He nodded approvingly. "Nevertheless, approach the business decisions with the same clarity you've shown so far. The proposals I brought today have merit, but don't rush. The right development partnership could double or triple your investment over time." "I trust your guidance on that front," I assured him, "as you've never steered Evelyn or me wrong before." Martin smiled, a hint of mischief in his expression. "Your mother would have loved this, you know. The drama of it all. Buying the resort where your children were vacationing without you, it has a certain poetic justice that would have appealed to her sense of humor." I laughed softly. "I thought the same thing when the idea first occurred to me. She always did appreciate a well-executed surprise." "Indeed she did." He clasped my hand warmly. "I'll review your children's proposals when they're ready. And Eleanor? Enjoy this. You've earned it, not just the financial success, but this moment of recognition from your family." After Martin departed, escorted by Keone to the helipad, I rejoined my children at the table. They were engaged in animated discussion about the development proposals, throwing out ideas and challenges with the energetic engagement of people, genuinely excited by possibilities. "Mom," Daniel called as I sat down, "we were just debating whether the wellness-focused development or the residential villas make more strategic sense as a first phase. What's your take?" I was struck by the naturalness with which he sought my opinion, not as a courtesy to his mother, but as genuine interest in my business perspective. It represented a subtle but significant shift in how he viewed me. "I think we need more information before making that determination," I replied thoughtfully. "The residential villas offer faster return on investment potentially, But the wellness concept might better differentiate the monarch in an increasingly competitive market. Jessica nodded approvingly. That's exactly my position. We should commission detailed feasibility studies for both concepts before deciding. What impressed me, Rebecca interjected, was how seriously Martin took Tom's ideas about sustainable luxury. I've been telling everyone for years that Tom has innovative perspectives worth listening to. Tom looked both pleased and slightly embarrassed by his wife's advocacy. Martin is just exceptionally good at recognizing potential from any source. That's clearly how he's built his success. Speaking of recognition, Bradley added, I thought the advisory board structure you proposed was quite elegant, Eleanor. Merit-based roles with clear deliverables strike the right balance between family opportunity and business discipline. I smiled, appreciating his professional acknowledgement. Thank you, Bradley. I believe it's important to establish clear expectations from the beginning. As our conversation continued, ranging from immediate resort improvements to longer-term development visions, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction, not just because my children were finally seeing me as more than just their mother, but because they were engaging with each other in ways that transcended their usual dynamics. Jessica was actually listening to Tom's ideas instead of dismissively, moving on. Daniel was acknowledging Bradley's financial expertise without competitive positioning. Rebecca was speaking up more confidently, her design insights treated with genuine respect rather than polite accommodation. Whether or not the monarch ultimately became a formal family business, something valuable had already been created in these few days together, a new understanding of each other's capabilities and worth. It wasn't about the money, though, that had certainly captured their attention initially. It was about recognition, respect, and the possibility of relating to each other in ways unconstrained by decades of established patterns. As I looked around the table at my children, these accomplished adults who had emerged from the struggling, often frightened young mother I had once been, I felt a surge of something beyond pride. It was a sense of completion, of cycles, turning in ways that brought unexpected grace. "What are you thinking, Mom?" Rebecca asked, noticing my momentary introspection. "You have that look you used to get when we were kids, and you were seeing something the rest of us missed." I smiled at her perceptiveness. I was just thinking that sometimes life's detours lead us to places we never imagined, but exactly where we need to be. Like buying a luxury resort because your kids excluded you from their vacation, Daniel quipped, though his tone held affection rather than mockery. Exactly like that, I laughed, raising my glass. To unexpected detours and where they lead? Us. As we clinked glasses, the distant rumble of thunder punctuated our toast, a reminder of approaching changes, both meteorological and metaphorical. Whatever tomorrow brought, we would face it differently than we had faced yesterday, with new understanding of ourselves and each other. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable acquisition of all. Morning arrived with the gentle patter of tropical rain against my villa's windows. The storm that had hastened Martin's departure the previous evening had settled into a soft, steady shower that blanketed the resort in peaceful quiet. I stood on my covered lanai, coffee in hand, watching raindrops create rippling patterns in the infinity pool below. There was something cleansing about the rain, washing away old perspectives and nourishing new possibilities. It seemed fitting for this final day of what had become a transformative family vacation, one that none of us could have anticipated when it began. My phone chimed softly with a message from Jessica. "Breakfast in my villa at 9. The children are requesting Grandma's famous pancakes. Ingredients already ordered from the kitchen." I smiled at this unexpected invitation. My famous pancakes were a simple tradition I'd started when the children were young. Ordinary pancakes embellished with fruit arranged in smiley faces or simple designs. That Jessica remembered, and that her children had specifically requested them, touched me deeply. "I'll be there," I replied, with spatula in hand. Another message arrived moments later, this one from Daniel. Mom, before you head to Jessica's, can you stop by my villa? Need your input on something. 8:30, okay? The rain continued its gentle cadence as I dressed for the day, choosing comfortable resort wear that could transition easily from breakfast preparations to whatever the day might bring. As I applied a touch of lipstick, I studied my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different from the one who had arrived at the Monarch just days ago. Her eyes clearer, her posture more assured, her expression peaceful rather than guarded. Daniel answered his villa door in wrinkled sleep. Clothes, his hair disheveled, his expression both tired and animated. Behind him, I could see his laptop open on the dining table, surrounded by scribbled notes and empty coffee cups. Have you been up all night? I asked as he ushered me in. Most of it, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. After dinner with Martin, I couldn't stop thinking about possibilities for the Monarch. Started drafting my proposal for the marketing strategy and just kept going. I glanced at his screen, which displayed a polished presentation titled The Monarch Renaissance, Strategic Positioning for the Ultra-Luxury Market. May I? I gestured toward his laptop. That's why I asked you to come. He nodded eagerly. I want your honest feedback before I share this with everyone. I sat down and began reviewing his work, impressed by the depth and thoughtfulness evident in each carefully crafted slide. Daniel had always been talented, but this presentation showed a level of strategic thinking and attention to detail that surpassed my expectations. He'd analyzed competitor positioning, identified unique attributes of the Monarch that could be leveraged for differentiation, and outlined a comprehensive approach to elevating the resort's brand position in the luxury market. This is exceptional work, I told him sincerely. Particularly your analysis of the shifting demographics in the ultra-luxury segment. The focus on experiential authenticity over ostentatious opulence is spot on. His face lit up with genuine pleasure at my professional validation. Thanks. I've been tracking these trends for clients, but applying them to the Monarch was different somehow. More personal. Because it is personal, I observed. This isn't just another client, it's something connected to our family. Daniel leaned against the counter, studying me with curious intensity. Why didn't you tell us about your inheritance when Grandma Evelyn died? 5 years, Mom. That's a long time to keep something that significant from your children. The directness of his question didn't surprise me. Daniel had always been the most straightforward of my children, sometimes painfully so. At first, it was simply about processing the change, I explained. The inheritance came as Evelyn was dying and I was retiring. 2 major life transitions simultaneously. I needed time to understand what it meant for me, who I would be in this new chapter. I paused, considering how to express the more complex motivations that had emerged later. As time passed, I began noticing subtle shifts in how you all treated me. The increasingly parental tone when discussing my finances or living situation. The assumptions about my capabilities and needs. I became curious about whether those attitudes stemmed from genuine concern or from perception of me as financially dependent. Daniel had the grace to look uncomfortable. And you got your answer when we excluded you from this vacation. I got several answers over time, I corrected gently. That was simply the most blatant. He sighed, rubbing his face tiredly. We deserve that. Looking back, I can see how condescending we've been. It's embarrassing, honestly. It's human, I countered. We all make assumptions based on incomplete information. I made plenty of my own over the years. Like what? He asked. Like assuming Jessica's perfectionism was just ambition rather than fear of disappointing me. Or that Rebecca's artistic pursuits were impractical rather than essential to her well-being. Or that you needed financial guidance more than emotional support. I met his gaze directly. We all have blind spots, Daniel. especially with those closest to us. He absorbed this thoughtfully. We need to talk more, not just about the monarch or business matters, but really talk. I realize I know so little about your life, your thoughts, what matters to you beyond being our mother. I'd like that, I said simply. A comfortable silence settled between us, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. After a moment, Daniel switched topics with characteristic agility. So, what do you think of the monarch renaissance concept? Too dramatic? Not at all, I smiled, appreciating his return to professional territory after our personal exchange. It captures the essence of what we're doing, not just renovating a property, but reimagining its identity and purpose. We spent another 20 minutes reviewing specific elements of his proposal before I glanced at my watch. I should head to Jessica's. Apparently, I have pancake duties to fulfill. Daniel walked me to the door, hesitating briefly before giving me a quick, almost shy hug. Thanks, Mom, for the feedback and everything else. That's what mothers do, I replied with a smile. Even mothers who own luxury resorts. The rain had lightened to a gentle mist as I made my way to Jessica's villa, located in the same premium section of the resort as mine. The sound of children's laughter greeted me before I even knocked, a chaotic, joyful soundtrack that brought an immediate smile to my face. Jessica opened the door with her youngest perched on her hip, her usually immaculate appearance softened into casual motherhood, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, face free of makeup, dressed in yoga pants and a resort t-shirt. The pancake. Master has arrived! She announced to cheers from the kitchen, where the twins were already stationed at the counter on high stools, and Lily was organizing berries into careful, color-coordinated rows. Grandma, I arranged the toppings, Lily proclaimed proudly. Blueberries, strawberries, bananas, and chocolate chips. But Mom says the chocolate is only for special designs. Very impressive organization, I complimented her, washing my hands at the sink. Shall we get started? For the next hour, pancake production became a family affair. Jessica mixed batter while I manned the griddle, the children calling out increasingly elaborate design requests. Everything from simple, smiley faces to ambitious attempts at dinosaurs and spaceships. Even Bradley emerged from the bedroom to join us, offering surprisingly creative suggestions for pancake artistry. I had no idea you had such hidden talents, Eleanor, he commented as I flipped a remarkably successful pancake starfish. You've been holding out on us. There's a lot you don't know about me, I replied with a wink, enjoying his momentary confusion. As we sat down to enjoy our breakfast creations, Rebecca and Tom arrived with their children, having received a last-minute invitation from Jessica. The villa's dining area became crowded and noisy, with children swapping pancakes and adults, passing coffee and juice around the table. It was chaotic and imperfect, a far cry from the elegant, controlled gatherings my children typically preferred. Yet there was an authenticity to this morning chaos that felt more genuinely connected than many of our more formal family occasions. Watching Jessica laugh as syrup dripped onto her expensive resort top, or seeing Bradley help his son cut a pancake without the slightest concern for the meeting he was missing, I glimpsed versions of my children rarely displayed in our usual interactions. We should do this more often, Rebecca said, echoing my thoughts as she helped clear plates after everyone had eaten their fill. Not just special occasions, but regular family breakfasts. Maybe once a month when we're all back. Home? I'd like that, I agreed, surprised and pleased by her suggestion. Speaking of home, Jessica began, exchanging glances with Daniel. We've been talking this morning about your new house in Key Biscayne. Yes, I prompted, curious about where this was heading. We'd like to help you get settled there, she continued. Daniel knows an excellent interior designer who could work with your preferences. Rebecca has connections with art galleries for building your collection. And I could assist with any legal matters related to the property. I was touched by The gesture, particularly coming from Jessica, who rarely volunteered for family projects. That's very thoughtful. Though I should warn you, I have rather definite ideas about my living space. We wouldn't dream of overriding your preferences, Daniel assured me. Think of us as resources, not directors. We just want to support this new chapter for you. The genuine warmth in their offers moved me deeply. This wasn't about controlling their suddenly wealthy mother or managing her affairs. It was about participating in her life in meaningful ways. I would welcome your involvement, I said sincerely. The house is spectacular but somewhat overwhelming. 7 bedrooms, a separate guest cottage, grounds that include a protected mangrove area. Rather more than I need, but the location captured me. 7 bedrooms? Rebecca repeated. That's substantial. Room for all of you to visit, I explained, separately or together as schedules permit. Actually, Tom spoke up, glancing at Rebecca for confirmation. We've been discussing the possibility of relocating to Florida ourselves. My new venture could operate from anywhere with good internet, and Rebecca's design clients are increasingly national rather than local. This was unexpected news. Really? You'd consider moving from Boston? Rebecca nodded. The climate would be better for Alex's asthma. And to be honest, we've been wanting a fresh start for a while now. Somewhere the cost of living isn't quite so punishing. Well, I said, absorbing this development, there's certainly room at Key Biscayne if you need transitional housing while you explore options. The guest cottage has 2 bedrooms and its own small kitchen. The conversation continued to flow, weaving between immediate vacation plans for our final days at the Monarch and longer-term family possibilities. Daniel mentioned potential business trips to Florida that could be extended for family time. Jessica suggested holiday gatherings at the Key Biscayne house instead of her cramped city apartment. Throughout these discussions, I observed a subtle but significant shift in how my children related to each other and to me. There was less positioning, less subtle competition for prominence, more genuine listening and building on each other's thoughts. The resort purchase had initially shocked them into seeing me differently, but something more profound was happening now. They were seeing each other differently too, and themselves in relation to our family system. As breakfast concluded and the children scattered to various resort activities with Bradley and Tom supervising, I found myself alone with my daughters, a rare occurrence in our busy, separated adult lives. I've been thinking about what happens next, Jessica began, refilling her coffee cup, with the Monarch and our potential roles there. As have I admitted. The advisory board structure feels right, but we need to be thoughtful about implementation. Balancing family connectivity with appropriate business governance will require clear boundaries. Rebecca leaned forward, uncharacteristically assertive. I've started sketching concepts for the southwestern wing renovation, incorporating some of the sustainable design principles Tom mentioned. Would you be open to reviewing them before we leave? I'd be delighted, I assured her. Your design, sensibility would be a tremendous asset to the Monarch. Jessica had been studying me with the thoughtful expression she typically reserved for complex legal problems. You know, Mom, I keep thinking about what you said regarding seeing us in fixed ways over the years. I think we've done the same with you. Cast you in the role of self-sacrificing mother for so long that we stopped seeing other dimensions of who you are. It was a role I embraced, I acknowledged, perhaps too completely at times. But that's changing now, Rebecca observed. For all of us, this week has been revelatory. In more ways than one, Jessica agreed with a wry smile. I never expected our exclusive family vacation to include Mom buying the resort out from under us. We all laughed at the absurdity of it, the tension of recent days finally dissipating entirely. Life delights in surprising us, I said. When your father left and I became a single mother with 3 young children, I never imagined I'd won Day be sitting in a luxury resort I partially owned, discussing business ventures with my accomplished adult children. And we never imagined our pragmatic, budget-conscious mother was secretly a millionaire with a flair for dramatic revelations, Daniel added, rejoining us on the terrace where we had moved to enjoy the clearing weather. The rain had stopped, entirely now, leaving the resort grounds glistening in renewed sunlight. From our elevated vantage point, we could see resort staff already rearranging pool furniture and preparing for guests to emerge from their rain day seclusion. I believe the Monarch was meant to be more than just a business venture or even a family project, I said thoughtfully, watching the activity below. It represents possibility, the opportunity to relate to each other in new ways, to build something meaningful together, to redefine what family means for us moving forward. My children exchanged glances that reflected understanding rather than skepticism. Something had shifted fundamentally in how they received my perspectives, no longer automatically filtering my words through assumptions about maternal sentimentality or impracticality. To possibility, then, Jessica proposed, raising her coffee cup in a toast. And to our extraordinarily surprising mother, who taught us never to underestimate anyone, especially not the woman who raised us. As we clinked cups in the morning sunshine, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with hurt at being excluded had transformed into something far more valuable than mere inclusion. It had created space for authentic recognition of me by my children, of them by each other, and perhaps most importantly, of the boundless potential that exists when we allow ourselves and those we love to transcend the limitations of familiar roles. The Monarch Resort stretched before us, its elegant buildings and lush landscapes representing not just a shrewd investment, but a new beginning for our family. Whatever challenges lay ahead in translating this vacation revelation into lasting change, we would face them with greater understanding and appreciation for each other. And that, I reflected as I gazed at my children's faces in the golden morning light, was worth far more than the price of any resort, no matter how luxurious. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.